Rise and shine, wake up. These are your dreams calling, wake up.
To wake up and realize that all is lost. The courage that carried me through the intimacy of life comes down to shattered dreams as Shutter speaks.
God spoke and light cascaded out of his mouth, erupted into a world of creation.
The flash keeps me awake. I'm kept away from achieving the desires of my heart.
We are creations of the Creator. He breathed the sun, he spoke stars and light.
Doubt settles, hope pedals, the curtain closes, raising my head up to a reality of lost dreams.
You are not living if you do not dream. Do not be the hammer hanging in the shed. Do not be the song never sung. Do not be the dance never danced. You are an incredible story. Wake up. These are your dreams. Wake up.
Good day, my name is Selai Khalakhala and I'm going to be joining you on Teach Every Nation's course as we dig into the foundations of youth ministry. If you are taking this course, you obviously have a passion for young people. Sometimes we need to remind ourselves of that very passion, especially when we are constantly faced with the challenges of youth ministry. Sometimes we need to be reminded of our own dream to see young people find their identity in Christ. In the same way, our youth need to be reminded that they also have a dream. Imagine what it could be if every young person in your community lives their God-given dream and potential. I'm now going to introduce you to our keynote speaker, Cassie Carstens. Now, Cassie is the co-founder of the African Leadership Institute for Community Transformation. He is also co-founder of The World Needs a Father, an international organization focused on restoring fathers to their God-given place in families. He has traveled the world extensively, communicating his passion for ministry through sport as well as community transformation. There's much more I could say, but let's not waste any more time. Cassie, we appreciate having you here, sharing your passionate heart and your God-given wisdom with us. Let's welcome Cassie to the stage.
Thank you so much. What a hearty welcome. Welcome to the training on foundations of youth ministry. It is a great privilege to speak to people that are involved in youth ministry because the passion for youth ministry is still burning in my heart. Many people, when I talk to them about youth ministry, they ask me, how do you create passion for it? Or how do you keep the passion alive for youth ministry? I've been involved in youth ministry for many years, and now 36 years after I've started with this, I still have a burning passion for the youth of Africa. How do you keep passion alive? Listen carefully. There is a very important slogan that you have to remember. The slogan says, passion is created in the tension between crisis and the vision. The tension between the crisis and the vision. So if, for instance, you lack some passion in your youth ministry, then you want to recreate some passion. How do you do that? Firstly, you go and look at the crisis. And then the passion is created in this tension between crisis and the vision. Let me read you something from Nehemiah. Because Nehemiah had a friend that came to give him a report on the condition of Jerusalem. And this is what he said to him. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been burned with fire. When I, Nehemiah, heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. Then I said, O Lord, God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps his covenant of love with those who love him. And then he carries on. He confesses the sins they have committed. But also he reminded God of the promise that God has given. That God said that if you turn back to me, then I will return to you, and I will even call you over the farthest horizons in exile, back to a place that I have established for my name. He reminded God of the dream. First, he was so touched by the passion of what happened, by the crisis of what happened in Jerusalem. But secondly, also, the burning dream for a new future was so alive in his heart. You know, in 2002, the passion for Africa was instilled in my soul. Let me take you there. I was in a refugee camp in Tanzania. 50,000 refugees, Congolese refugees in Tanzania. And I tried to find out why people go to refugee camps. And as I'm talking to one of the leaders, "Sir, why did you end up in a refugee camp?" This was the answer of the leader. He said to me, "I was there, a leader in a small little village. And then the rebel forces came in, 19, 18-year-old boys. And they came in with machine guns and with machetes. Machetes are sharpened blades. They came in with machine guns and machetes. And they made us stand in a long line. And there was a 6-year-old boy on the other side of the line. I was standing on this side of the line. They took the 6-year-old boy. They took the machete. They chopped off his hand. Then they chopped off his arm. Then the other hand. Then the arm. Then the legs. And then they chopped up the whole body in front of me." As I heard the story happening in Africa, I was so shocked. But then this person bent forward and he looked straight into my eyes. He actually looked straight into my soul and he said, "If that boy was an unnamed boy that I didn't know, it would have been fine. But that boy was my own grandson." The next guy I interviewed had another story of a pregnant lady which they cut open and they chopped up the baby in front of his eyes. And the shock of the crisis of Africa entered my soul. I will never forget that day. I was so shocked. I cried out to God and I said to God, "God, what is the problem with Africa?" And then God started to teach me about the problems of Africa. And I started to investigate in the seriousness of the problems of Africa and try and find the solution for that. So if the flame of the passion goes down in your life, please go and interact with the crisis again. Go and confront the crisis again. After that, I got involved in a township in South Africa. And in that township, I discovered that out of every 4 girls before they are 13 years old, they are raped in that township. And again, this heavy shock in my soul, the crisis of Africa. I went up into Africa to do training. One pastor came to me that ran an orphanage for 700 teenage girls. And he came to me and he said, "You know what happened just a month ago? The army moved in and they raped all these girls. Please come and help." The shock of the crisis of Africa. Me and my wife got involved because we knew that Africa was filled with orphans. And in that local township that we used to work in, she cared for 360 orphans. And the 360 orphans kept the crisis alive in my heart. I will never forget traveling up also north into Africa. I interacted with widows in Africa, asked them what would be their biggest problem that they encounter in their lives. They would tell me that the biggest problem is to care for the children. And they would be teachers, but what they earned as a salary as for their teaching would not be enough to pay the rent. And then all the men would offer them to buy food for the children if they would have sex with them. The crisis of being challenged. I'll never forget that day when the lady said to me, "I'm a child of the living God. It is so difficult. I do not want extramarital sex. I do not believe it is the right thing. But if your children cry because they are so hungry, what do? The crisis of Africa." My friend, Africa has an enormous crisis. I was totally shocked 3 weeks ago when I got a report of UNICEF, the report of UNICEF. And in this report, they predict the future of Africa, and this is what they say. From 2015 to 2050, not long into the future, 2 billion new babies will be born in Africa. Now, I already know that the average age of Africa is 19.6 years old. Half of the population of Africa is older than 19.6, and half of the population of Africa is younger than 19.6. If another 2 billion children will be born in Africa in the next 40 years, we will have a massive youth population in Africa. My crisis of this is not that we have more youth because they are so beautiful and so wonderful. But my crisis is the following. Who is going to lead them? And who is going to father them? Because in Africa, we know, like in South Africa, that more than 60% of all the children in South Africa grow up without their biological fathers. The same is happening into the north of Africa. Who is going to father them if we have another 2 billion new babies in Africa in the next 40 years? Africa has a crisis. And the crisis is this. There are horrific things happening in Africa. There are many, many orphans and widows in Africa. Africa is a fatherless continent. We have enormous challenges in Africa. And if you only focus your mind on the crisis in Africa, you will be in serious trouble. Because that will help you to end up in despair. And therefore, if you want to create real passion and not despair, you cannot only look at the crisis of Africa. You've got to look at the dream for Africa as well. And you've got to have a strong vision for the dream in Africa. And therefore, you must be first filled by the holy discontent of God. This is not right. This must stop right here. And this will fire the flame. This will push you towards the passion. But the dream will pull you towards the outcome. And therefore, you need a dream for Africa. And we as youth workers or people in ministry, in youth ministry, we must renew and refresh the dream that God has for Africa again in our hearts. Where is the dream? If you travel in Africa, you know what they say? So many young people say, my dream is to go to America, to go to Europe. My dream is to just escape Africa. My friend, you will never find your dream by just escaping your situation. Who told us this? Jesus told us this. Why? Jesus came from heaven to earth to tell us, do you want to have heaven? Heaven is not a place. Heaven is my presence. I come from heaven to earth to pour heaven into your heart. And therefore, the first thing, if you want to have this wonderful heaven on earth, you've got to open your heart so that Jesus would come. And He put His heaven into your heart, the character of God, the love of God, the joy of God into your heart, so that your heart will be filled, your life will be filled with the character of God. Where is heaven on earth? Heaven on earth is where we have relationships that are sound, filled with love, where people trust each other, where they love and care and support each other. That is heaven on earth. Jesus brought heaven to earth. We can have heaven at home, in our homes, in our relationships, with parents, with children, with friends. Keep that dream alive of heaven on earth in relationships. And then thirdly, if you want heaven, then you receive the supernatural, the superior principles of the kingdom of God as you are praying. Let your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. That you receive the superior principles from heaven to govern this earth. We live in a world that is governed with inferior principles, and that is why so many people are suffering. But we are the children of the living God. And that's why we have the superior principles with which we can invade this world. We can invade the sports world with the superior principles from God. We can invade governance. We can invade education. We can invade life by the superior principles that God taught us. What a wonderful thing to know that Jesus brought heaven to earth. And that heaven can live in my heart. And that heaven can live in my home. And that heaven can invade society and all the spheres of society. This is our dream. And the one thing that comforts me is when Jesus picked His disciples. Who did He pick? He picked the youngest people around. Some people even argue that some of His disciples were 12 years old. Can you believe this? I don't know if that is true. All I know is they were very close to 20 years old. And therefore, Jesus believed that the youth of His nation and the youth of the world can carry the message, the hope for the rest of the world. Heaven is here. Heaven can be in us, with us, and everywhere. I have a dream for Africa. I hope you have a dream for Africa that is passionate and alive, a fire that is burning to say the future of Africa is not a place where we go. A future of Africa is the condition that we will change. A condition where Christ reigns and heaven is with us forever. May God bless you.
Thank you so much, Cassie. And if there's anybody in the audience or at home who's rethinking their calling, I'm sure they are very awake now and ready to reignite that dream. We're going to give you some time now to work through your workbook. And as you do that, perhaps you could ask God to remind you very specifically who the young people are into whose lives you are investing and how you can help them reignite that dream. Now it's time to start working through your workbook and reflect on what you have heard up to now. It's time to move forward. Remember, every time you fill out that workbook, it's not about getting all the answers right. It's about allowing God's Spirit to speak into your heart as you engage in this learning process. Well now, it's not only Cassie who has words of wisdom on the subject. In fact, I'm sure Cassie will be the first to say we should hear what the people say who are working with youth on ground level all across the world. During this course, we will be listening to the invaluable perspective of two brothers, Pastor Joshua Mtaelwa and his younger brother, Pastor Kolani Mtaelwa, who pastored the Agape Family Church in Katlehong, South Africa. We'll also be listening to the views of young leaders from across the world regarding their perspective on youth ministry. These are leaders from all spheres of society attending the African Leadership Institute for Community Transformation, or ALECT as they call it, all very passionate about youth ministry. Let's hear what some of them have to say.
One of the greatest challenges that we also have in South Africa is that in the midst of many opportunities that young people has, but there is no drive towards those opportunities, because the opportunities are not gonna come to your house and says, yeah, because most of the time the opportunities that comes, it is opportunity that says you need to work, it is opportunity that says you need to go out and do something about those opportunities. But if you don't have a dream, you're not gonna stand up and do something about it. I believe that the dream is the driving force that will take you out of your comfort zones into the world where you'll be able to do something about your life. So yes, as many opportunities are there, people are missing them because they don't have dreams to take over those opportunities.
Most of the young people that we have, they don't have both parents at home. And then it made it difficult for them to have someone that will encourage them to dream. So it's a role of the church to play that part, to say how to make our young people to get to that point to say how can they dream. I think one thing that we do as a church is to make sure that we create an environment where it is easy for them to come into the church and be able to be taught to say how to dream and how to realize a dream. In a normal family setup, both parents need to raise up a child. But in our community, we're facing that a problem where there's no father, especially the fatherless generation. So the church comes in to say, as a church, how can we make sure that our young people get to that point where they could dream and be able to realize their dreams?
The situation of the youth in Kenya, I'll say, is 50-50, in the sense that there are few who've been given the opportunity, but there are still a big number of youth who have not been given the platform to properly and adequately bring forth whatever lies in them.
Have young people in Africa lost the ability to dream? No. Actually, with the social media and an open world, their dreams have become way bigger than they were before. They're dreaming bigger, they're dreaming better, they're dreaming beyond their borders. The issue that I'm seeing is that the social support structure is not growing as fast as their dreams are growing. So there creates this gap between their dreams and how they can realize their dreams. So that gap is creating this tension that is leaving a very disillusioned generation, which is what we are seeing in Africa now. So dreaming, they're dreaming bigger and they will dream bigger.
I think the dream is still there. It can be sometimes quiet or in silence. They just need a hand sometimes or more hope for them to believe that they can still dream and they have the abilities and they have the gift, the competencies to do things. They need support from churches, from people who have experiences, from different resources, human, but dream is there.
Young people in Africa have lost their ability to dream. Young people in Africa, I think, are still dreaming. They're dreaming a lot. They've got big dreams. Sometimes I think they've been taught, some churches, some institutions are telling them to dream bigger. But their ability or their capacity then to realize that dream is diminished. So then it just stays as a dream. It then doesn't go beyond the dreaming phase. It doesn't then get to implementation because one is not capacitated to go into that. So then as a young person, most people then just minimize their dream. So you just make your dream smaller. It's not increase your faith, it's more of reduce your dream such that your faith is sufficient for that dream. So there's an issue of stifling of dreams. So if I want to grow up within any institution, secular or church, sometimes when you dream too much, then that dream is stifled. To say, no, you dream only up to here. So the institutions then do not give that capacity for one to dream beyond a certain point. So I'd like to believe that young people in Africa still dream. They dream a lot. They dream of a better society, better families, even better lives for their own children as well. But then the ability to realize that dream is limited. And I think hence the need for training, hence the need for capacity building, hence the need for strategic life plans to say how then do you reach to that goal towards that dream. So I think young people still dream. I think they just need to be encouraged and also be taught on how to achieve that dream.
Given opportunity, there is hope. And there's a lot of possibility that this hope will transform into a lot in the spiritual world and in the general perspective of life.
Sometimes, you know, when you baby someone, they'll still remain a baby. What am I saying? When you dream too much, you're told that you're getting too big for your head. So then that dream as well is then kept to a minimum, because you're not allowed to dream beyond a certain point, even though I've dreamed. So if you notice that we, as churches, as faith-based organizations, we are not creating business hubs, we're not creating technology hubs. As Christian organizations, we're not creating that. It's happening in secular institutions where they're encouraging innovation. And so you then realize that people who are doing amazing things are only doing normal things, the things that we are supposed to be doing anyway, regardless of us being in church. So encouraging that innovation, encouraging that dreaming. So sometimes we baby people, it's like, as long as you're under my roof, you only do this. You play by the rules within, underneath my roof. So I think there has to be an encouragement to think beyond, to dream beyond, and not to stifle that growth.
They need somebody to guide them. They need somebody to listen to them. They need somebody to bring that dream from a broad thing to a well manageable, practical thing that they can follow. They don't have that guidance. The church can play a very big role in that, right? Because of the trust that the church is creating in speaking to their lives. The church has a very unique potential opportunity to do that, right? And if we don't grab that opportunity, after they lose trust in the church, that's it, a whole generation gone.
And that brings us to the end of the first video in our Foundations of Youth Ministry series. In your groups, you can discuss the questions in the workbook. Let's reignite that dream in the lives of the young people in our communities.